I suppose the biggest question is, do we know what Donald Trump is going to do when it comes to tariffs this week? Do you know?
Yeah, no, he hasn't released it other than to say that it's going to be 25% tariffs on automobiles. But other than that, he hasn't been specific. We're all going to be in suspense. I think he knows exactly what he's going to do, but he wants to wait and announce it so everyone can watch it at the same time. So I think that's his plan.
And there is a sense here in the UK that that is exactly what this is about. It's a big bang strategy. Why do you think Donald Trump wants to make such an impact with this particular policy?
Well, I think he's upset because he feels that the tariffs around the world have been unfair. If you look at, for instance, the EU, there's a 10% tariff on autos coming into the EU, along with a 17 to 27% VAT tax. We don't have that here. I think at the most it's a 2.5% tariff on cars coming in. So you're looking at a four times greater tariff into the EU, and you don't see hardly any American cars there. So, he's looking at that and going, "Look, this hasn't been right for a long time." And he's even said that he's going to make the auto part of it permanent. So that's different than what he's saying on some of the other tariffs. But Canada's a big factor. Canada's had tariffs on dairy and eggs and other things for a long time. India has high tariffs on autos coming into their country. So he's basically putting down and saying, "Look, we're not going to put up with this anymore. Your markets are open here, but you won't open the markets there."
How much of this is about a domestic agenda? Because, I mean, you mentioned eggs offhand. I know that the price of eggs in America is a big talking point. How much of this is about refocusing the tax system in America away from personal taxes and towards international taxes?
Well, I think there is a big factor in that. He's talked about it. You've heard Peter Navarro, is one of his trade representatives, talk about $600 billion over 10 years in new tariff taxes. And I think that's a big factor. But it's about moving manufacturing back in the United States. I mean, that's what he wants to do. He feels like, and it's true, if you look at the manufacturing jobs over the last 25 years, they've all effectively been exported to China for the most part. And we know what's gone on there, and so they're going to experience tariffs as well. And again, the whole point of it is either let's everybody go to zero tariffs, or we're going to put tariffs on and move manufacturing to the United States.
How successful do you think it's going to be? Because we've seen the impact on the international markets already, especially after Donald Trump seemed to suggest it wouldn't be targeting 15 countries for tariffs. It would be a flat tariff, as you've suggested there, across the world. I mean, there has been a real dip in markets off the back of this. Do you think it's going to work?
Yeah, I think it will. I think it will in the long term. In the short term, there's going to be volatility. The dip in the markets is actually fairly normal. It's not like it's been a huge thing. I mean, I think U.S. markets down about 6.5%, 6% year to date. Pretty standard kind of correction. You could also argue that there's a thing called the yen carry trade where people have borrowed in yen and moved it over here and bought the Magnificent Seven, and that trade's kind of unwinding as Japan raised interest rates, and so that could be a factor in the sell-off as well. May not have anything to do with tariffs in that instance. So we'll see. I think we'll have to look a little longer term to see what happens. I wouldn't be surprised if right after the tariffs go into effect, let's say on Wednesday or Thursday, I guess it's going to be Thursday. You could see a rally in the markets. So once it's kind of priced in, everybody knows what's going to happen. I think markets are very difficult to predict in the short term. And so I think we're going to just have to see what this does in the long term. He has talked about, you've seen President Trump talk about the investment that other countries and other companies have talked about making into the United States. So he feels like it's working.
So is that what this is about? I mean, is there a world in which the tariffs are obviously probably going to be introduced? It's unlikely that the UK will get a carve out. Is there a world in which at some later point, if the UK were to say, okay, well, look, we'll knock tariffs off here, we'll take our tariffs 10% off cars, we'll knock those things off, that Trump just lifts it in certain circumstances? Or do you think that he will pursue this, in perpetuity?
No, I do think if other countries, if the UK says, "Hey, we're going to cut tariffs here and here and here," I think he will, reciprocate on that. So he's basically said that he wants, reciprocal trade tariffs. That's the way he's talked about it. The only thing he's carved out on that has been autos. But I think he could change his mind there as well if it makes sense. He's going to have to look at it and say, okay, well, there's certain parts that are made here or there, or there's different parts of the manufacturing process. One of the things that was really frustrating, I think, for him and others is that we have this free trade agreement with Mexico as an example. What China was doing was they were circumventing it. They were simply making the goods in China, sending them to Mexico, having them assembled in Mexico, which is not really anything, and then avoiding tariffs coming in, and then while putting tariffs on U.S. goods. So, those are the kind of things that have been going on, and he's trying to cut those down.
How much? I mean, I suppose the question, the UK has put a deal on the table. I mean, we don't know what it is, but we do understand that it removes the digital services tax, which I know is something that both Elon Musk and Donald Trump have really called for the UK to do. There are other concessions from the UK side on agriculture, for example. That's on the table, and yet Donald Trump won't sign it.
Yeah, well, we don't know the details of it, so you never know. I mean, he could be holding out, and next week you could see a deal struck, right? So I think he's very willing to work a deal with countries and to have changes in the tariffs, even as short as a week into it, if things change. So I don't think we should. I don't think any of us should look at this and go, "Oh my gosh, this is a permanent situation that's going to last a long time." Especially if countries and others come to the table and say, okay, we'll make these changes.
What does that say about trust, though, between countries? Because our prime minister has made quite a big deal of trying to forge a friendship, a good relationship, a working relationship with Donald Trump. They spoke on Sunday, and yet it does seem a little bit like this is holding the UK to ransom.
Well, is it a ransom? I mean, the UK is putting tariffs on goods that we don't have tariffs on here. So, I mean, that's kind of what he's looking at, right? Is countries are putting tariffs on to protect certain industries for whatever particular reason. And that's we haven't been doing that on this end. So, I mean, that's I don't know that I'd look at that as ransom. I think it's more like, look, why don't you go to where we are, or we're going to have to put tariffs and reciprocate and match what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Is there a link to free speech here? There's been a suggestion that part of this is about the UK's attitude to free speech, and that Donald Trump wants to see some protections or concessions there from the government in order to remove these tariffs.
I haven't seen that, but I would say that that is of real concern with many people here in the United States. I mean, we see it reported here about people being arrested for making posts online, for being upset about a particular government policy or whatever, and it is really concerning when you see that. You saw what happened in France. They just Marie Le Pen, they've charged and convicted, and said now she can't run in 4 years. Everyone over here is looking at that and saying that is very similar to what they tried to do to President Trump. So,
But she
I mean,
was found to have broken the law, wasn't she? I mean, that's why she's been sentenced in that way.
well, you know what? President Trump was actually convicted over here as well. So, they tried to do it here. They couldn't because we had laws that wouldn't allow that to actually take place. They weren't going to let one state dictate policy for the entire country. But they did actually convict him, as you recall, in the state of New York. And we don't have time to go into it, but it was pretty Mickey Mouse. And it sounds like, from what I've read, they were saying that she was taking funds that weren't supposed to be, and reallocating them. Look, that sounds pretty political to me. I mean, it was all based in politics, funding for particular staffers allocated to different staffers, right?
But
I
if it's
mean,
illegal, if it is illegal to use money in that way, then you're breaking the law, aren't you?
yeah, I guess so. So, you know what? I'm sure that no one on the Socialist Party in France has ever done anything illegal.
Speaking of legality, are these tariffs legal? Because my understanding is that the legislation that Donald Trump is using to impose them, it suggests that this really can only be done in times of war or for any particular specific reason. For example, you might talk about immigration or drugs, which were the reasons cited previously. If you're going to do a blanket tariff, is it legal?
He was able to do some tariffs the first term, and it didn't seem to be a problem. There is a big problem with drugs coming into the country. There's a big problem with illegal immigration coming into the country. He has declared some emergencies in those situations. But it looked to me like, especially when you look at 2017, 2018, when he put tariffs on previously, that didn't seem to be a problem. There wasn't a challenge to it from a legality standpoint.
Finally, are you worried about the impact on Americans here? Because they will be ultimately the people that will pay extra for goods if they are imported and a tariff is levied and it's passed on by the company. I mean, the domestic situation in America at the moment is a bit shaky in terms of the economy. People are not feeling too great. Are you worried about the impact of this?
Well, it's consumer choice, right? So if I want to avoid, for instance, an auto tariff on a foreign car, I would buy an American car. So there is a choice there. And again, I would just go back to are people in the EU and the UK concerned about tariffs on cars coming in that they're having to pay if they want to buy those cars? So it goes both ways. There doesn't seem to be a lot of concern in the UK over it. So I would anticipate those that want to buy a very expensive Mercedes will still buy that Mercedes if they want to, even if it's a higher price. And those that don't will look to an American car.
Hal Lambert, many thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.